You don't belong here. Show me ID now.
Stand on my own property. I'm a retired police chief. Do you have a warrant?
Don't play smart with me. You think just because you're black and in a robe I won't take action? Hands where I can see it.
Identification, now. Don't make this worse.
Nathaniel repeated. You detained a 62-year-old U.S. citizen with no warrant at an address that isn't connected to any active operation. What exactly is under review? The line went to hold. Nathaniel didn't wait. His mech call went to the Ridgefield Police Department where his hook. At 6:40 a.m. on a quiet Wednesday morning in Crestwood, Georgia, a retired police chief stepped out his own front door to grab the newspaper. And within minutes, he was face down against his own truck, handcuffed on his own driveway, surrounded by federal agents who never once produced a warrant. What happened next would turn a peaceful suburban street into a scene no one there would ever forget. At 6:40 a.m. on a quiet Wednesday morning in Crestwood, Georgia, Deuce still sat on the lawns of Maple Ridge Drive. The street was calm, lined with manicured hedges, two-car garages, and American flags hanging from porches that had never seen trouble. It was a kind of neighborhood where people waved from their driveways and left packages on doorsteps without worry. Predominantly white, upper middle class, and safe in every way the word was supposed to mean. Clarence Dupree, 62 years old, stepped out his front door in slippers and a terry cloth robe, coffee in one hand, heading for the newspaper at the end of the driveway. Through the front window behind him, a row of framed commendation plaques from the Ridgefield Police Department were visible on the wall, each one marking a chapter of a career that had spanned more than 3 decades. Clarence had started as a patrol officer at 25, walking beats in neighborhoods no one else wanted. He worked narcotics, led a tactical unit, made sergeant, then lieutenant, then captain. At 52, the city appointed him chief of police, the first black man to hold a position in Ridgefield's 140-year history. He served for 7 years, oversaw department reforms, reduced use of force complaints by 40%, and retired with full honors. The governor had sent a letter. His officers had lined the street the day he walked out for the last time. Now 3 years into retirement, Clarence spent his mornings in the garden, walked his dog along the creek behind the house, and read the paper on the porch before his wife woke up. His neighbors respected him. They knew his name. They knew what he had given. He bent down, picked up the newspaper, tucked it under his arm, and turned back toward the porch. That was when 2 black Chevrolet Suburbans turned onto Maple Ridge Drive. They moved slowly, almost deliberately, tinted windows catching the early light. They stopped in front of Clarence's house. 4 men stepped out, all wearing tactical vests with the letters IC printed across the chest. The lead agent was Victor Stelling, 44 years old, with 16 years at Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Stelling had built his reputation on aggressive field operations, the kind that generated strong quarterly numbers and an equal number of complaints from immigration advocacy groups. His file contained 9 formal complaints over the past 6 years, ranging from unlawful entry to excessive force during detentions. None had resulted in discipline. He had learned, like so many before him, that the system would absorb the complaints and keep him in the field. His partner was Kyle Fenton, 31, 5 years on the job, a younger agent who had attached himself to Stelling early and never let go. Fenton mimicked Stelling's language, copied his approach, laughed at the same jokes, and never once questioned a decision in the field. 2 additional agents stayed near the vehicles, hands resting on their belts, scanning the quiet street like they had rolled into a hostile zone. They were supposed to be looking for an undocumented immigrant connected to a residence 3 blocks east. The address didn't match. The name didn't match. Nothing about Clarence Dupree's home had any connection to their operation. But Stelling had spotted something through the windshield as they drove past. A black man standing in the driveway of a house that, in his judgment, didn't seem to belong to someone who looked like that. He didn't check the file. He didn't confirm the address. He didn't radio dispatch. He just pulled over, stepped out, and started walking toward Clarence with the kind of certainty that comes from years of never being held accountable. Fenton followed 1 step behind, right hand resting on his belt. Clarence looked up from his driveway, newspaper under one arm, coffee still warm in his hand, and saw 4 federal agents approaching his front lawn. His posture straightened, not out of fear, but out of recognition. After 34 years in law enforcement, He knew exactly what he was looking at, and he knew, with the instinct of a man who had spent his life on the other side of the badge, that what was about to happen had nothing to do with any warrant. Stelling closed the distance fast, stopping 3 feet from Clarence with the kind of proximity that wasn't professional. It was territorial. He looked Clarence up and down, eyes moving over the bathrobe, the slippers, the newspaper. "I need to see some identification." His voice wasn't a request. It was a command wrapped in the assumption that it would be obeyed without question. Clarence didn't flinch. He had heard that tone thousands of times across 34 years. He had trained officers never to use it unless the situation demanded it. The situation didn't. He kept his hands visible, coffee still in one, newspaper tucked under the other arm. "Good morning. What's this about?" Stelling's jaw tightened. "I said, I need identification. Now!" Fenton shifted to Clarence's right side, cutting off the path to the front door. His hands hovered near his belt. Clarence noted the positioning instinctively. A flank. He had taught that formation himself to patrol teams. 2 points of control on a single subject. Standard procedure for a threat. Absurd for a man in slippers holding a newspaper. "I'm a retired law enforcement officer," Clarence said, voice steady and clear. "Retired chief of police, Ridgefield PD. I've lived at this address for 11 years. Do you have a warrant?" Stelling didn't answer. He didn't acknowledge the career. He didn't ask for clarification. He looked at Clarence the way he had looked at dozens before him. People whose answers didn't matter because a decision had already been made. "Put your hands where I can see them." Both of them. Clarence slowly lowered the newspaper. "I'm standing on my own property in a bathrobe. I've identified myself verbally. I'm asking again, do you have a warrant for this address?" Stelling stepped closer. Close enough that Clarence could smell the coffee on his breath. "We'll determine whose property this is." Across the street, a curtain shifted. 2 houses down, a garage door that had been halfway open stopped moving. A woman, in a second-floor window, pressed her face closer to the glass. Maple Ridge Drive was waking up, and what it was waking up to was something it had never seen before. Clarence kept his voice calm. "My ID is inside the house. I'm happy to go get it." He turned slightly toward the front door. Stelling moved into his path, chest forward, blocking the walkway completely. "Nobody is going inside." Clarence stopped. He didn't step back, but he didn't push forward. He understood exactly what was happening. He had seen it enough times from the other side to recognize the moment. Once an officer decides you don't get the benefit of the doubt, every option closes. Reach for ID, it's a sudden movement. Stand still, you're uncooperative. Ask questions, you're combative. There is no correct response because the response was never the point. "I am not resisting," Clarence said, louder now, deliberate, projecting. "I am a retired police chief. I am unarmed. I am on my own property." Stelling's mouth curved slightly. "Sure you are." He turned to Fenton. "Cuff him." Fenton moved immediately, grabbing Clarence's left wrist and pulling it behind his back. Clarence did not resist. He kept his body loose, feet planted. "Do you have a warrant for this address?" he asked again. No one answered. Stelling stepped forward and drove his palm into Clarence's upper back, shoving him against the side of his own truck parked in the driveway. The impact knocked the air from his chest. His bathrobe tore at the shoulder seam. The coffee mug slipped from his hand and shattered on concrete, brown liquid spreading across the driveway in a slow, dark stain. Fenton wrenched both arms back and snapped the cuffs on, ratcheting them 2 clicks tighter than necessary. Clarence's cheek pressed against the cold metal of the truck bed. His breath fogged against the surface. From where his face rested, he could see his front porch. The American flag hung still in the windless morning. The commendation plaques were visible through the window. And somewhere behind him, the 2 men who had put him in cuffs hadn't once looked at a warrant, checked an address, or confirmed a name, because none of that had ever been the point. The first door to open was Ruth Angelman's, 71 years old, a retired schoolteacher who had lived next door for 20 years. She had watched him build the garden bed along the fence line. She had brought over pie of the week. He moved in and never stopped. She stepped onto her porch in a housecoat, one hand gripping the railing, and saw Clarence Dupree face down against his own truck, hands cuffed bathrobe torn, surrounded by men in tactical vests. Her voice rang across the yard. "That's Chief Dupree. What are you doing to him? He lives here." Stelling didn't turn. Fenton glanced over his shoulder. "Ma'am, go back inside." "I will not go back inside. That man is my neighbor. He's a retired police chief. You have no business putting your hands on him." Across the street, a front door opened. Donald Pratt, 64, a white retired firefighter with 30 years on the job, stepped out with his phone already raised and recording. He didn't speak at first. He just aimed the camera and started walking closer. "What are your badge numbers?" Donald asked, voice flat and direct. Stelling turned. "Sir, step back and go inside. This is a federal operation." Donald didn't move. "I asked for your badge numbers. You're detaining a man on his own property. I have a right to record." Stelling's jaw tightened. "If you interfere with a federal operation, I will charge you with obstruction." "Try it," Donald said. "I'm standing on a public sidewalk." 2 houses down, a young couple appeared at their upstairs window, phones pressed against the glass, recording from an elevated angle that captured everything. The driveway, the SUVs, the agents, the torn robe, the shattered mug. Another garage door opened. A woman jogging at the corner stopped and pulled out her phone. At least 5 cameras were recording now. The entire cul-de-sac had become a witness. And not one of those cameras showed a warrant, a file, or a legitimate reason for what was happening in Clarence Dupree's driveway. Officers who had worked under Clarence for decades still walked the halls of the Ridgefield Police Department. The name Dupree still carried weight there. Word traveled fast. Within the hour, Yvonne Saunders, Clarence's former deputy chief and now acting chief, picked up her phone and called IC directly. She confirmed Clarence's full name, date of birth, citizenship address, rank, and career history. She was told they were verifying the information. Saunders' voice never rose. It didn't need to. "You arrested a 34-year law enforcement veteran in his bathrobe, in his own driveway, with no warrant. What exactly are you verifying?" Silence answered her. "I'm going to give you my direct number," she continued evenly, "and then I'm going to call the Department of Justice. You have 1 hour to make this right before it stops being a phone call and becomes a federal incident." At 8:47 a.m., Donald Pratt uploaded the video. He didn't add a caption. He didn't need one. The footage spoke clearly on its own. It showed Stelling's aggressive approach, Clarence's calm compliance, the repeated demand for identification, the refusal to answer questions about a warrant, the shove against the truck, the torn bathrobe, the coffee mug shattering across the driveway, and Ruth Angelman's voice cutting through the air. "That's Chief Dupree. What are you doing to him?" By noon, the video had 200,000 views. By evening, it had passed 2 million. Local news stations ran it first. National outlets followed. The headline wrote itself in variations across every network. ICE agents arrest retired black police chief in his own driveway. No warrant. No cause. Veterans groups issued statements. Police associations called it a disgrace to badge. Civil rights organizations demanded immediate investigation. Retired officers across the country reposted the video with a single line. "That could have been any of us." The Garrett couple's upstairs footage added a wider angle. The full cul-de-sac, the SUVs, the backup agent standing near the vehicles, while a 62-year-old man in slippers was cuffed on his own property. That second angle spread even faster. The optics were devastating, and they were undeniable. A decorated black law enforcement leader who had spent his life protecting his community was treated like a fugitive beneath a flag he had earned the right to fly. And every second of it had been recorded by neighbors who knew him by name. By midday, the video reached Washington. ICE leadership was briefed. The regional field office director pulled Stelling's operational file and confirmed within minutes what Clarence had said from the start. There was no warrant for his address. There had never been one. The target residence was 3 blocks east on a different street with a different house number. Stelling had never verified the address. He had never cross-referenced the file. He had never contacted dispatch. He had seen a black man in a neighborhood he didn't expect and acted on instinct instead of protocol. An internal review of his record uncovered a memo that should have stopped him years earlier. He had been flagged twice before. once for entering the wrong home in Gwinnett County and detaining a legal resident for 4 hours, once for excessive force in Cobb County that resulted in a cracked rib. Both complaints were reviewed. Both were closed. No discipline. No retraining. No consequence. Now, the same system was watching a video with 6 million views, proving what those complaints had warned. The regional director ordered Clarence's immediate release. No charges had ever been filed. No probable cause had ever existed. 7 hours after he was taken, Clarence was driven back to Crestwood in the same SUV. The ride was silent. No apology. When the vehicle turned onto Maple Ridge Drive, news vans lined the curb. Cameras were rolling. Clarence stepped out in the same torn bathrobe and slippers. The cameras captured the marks on his wrists, the stiffness in his shoulders, the way he paused at the stain where his coffee had spilled that morning. Ruth reached him first, crossing the lawn and wrapping her arms around him. She held on tightly. Donald extended his hand. Clarence took it. A gnawed pass between them. A reporter asked, "Chief Dupree, do you have anything to say?" Clarence faced the camera. "I gave 34 years to law enforcement. I believed in the badge. Today that badge was used against me because of the color of my skin on my own property, without a warrant or a reason. That's not law enforcement. That's something else." Inside the house, Evelyn Dupree sat at the kitchen table, hands trembling around a glass of water she hadn't touched. She had watched the arrest from behind a bedroom window, afraid that if she stepped outside, the situation would escalate further. When Clarence sat beside her, she looked at him through eyes swollen from hours of tears. "I watched them take you, and I couldn't breathe," she whispered. What if Nathaniel hadn't been a lawyer? What if no one had been filming? They both knew the answer. Nathaniel Dupree, Army JAG attorney, had already filed a formal complaint with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division before his father returned home. The document was meticulous: unlawful detention, warrantless arrest, excessive force, racial profiling, Fourth Amendment violations, each claim supported by video evidence, witness testimony, and operational records proving the address was wrong. Within 48 hours, the DOJ opened an investigation. The DHS Inspector General launched a parallel inquiry. Congressional leaders called for hearings. Then investigators reviewed body camera footage. Stelling and Fenton had not activated theirs, a violation of policy, but the backup agents' cameras had captured enough. The footage showed Clarence compliant, calm, repeatedly identify himself, asking for a warrant 3 times, never resisting. Investigators didn't need to watch it twice. The deeper they dug, the worse it became. In 4 years, Stelling's unit had conducted 86 operations in predominantly white neighborhoods. In 61 of those operations, the individuals stopped were Black or Latino residents with no connection to immigration cases. 14 prior complaints, all dismissed. Language identical in every report. Officer acted within discretion. Insufficient evidence. No further action recommended. Fenton's records revealed falsified after-action reports. A junior agent, Omar Basher, stepped forward as a whistleblower, describing a culture of racial targeting. He had filed an internal complaint 6 months earlier. It had been logged and ignored. The evidence required no interpretation. Victor Stelling was terminated for gross misconduct, racial profiling, failure to verify operational targets, and violation of constitutional protections. His federal certification was revoked. He was referred for criminal prosecution. Kyle Fenton was terminated for unlawful arrest, failure to intervene, falsifying reports, and failing to activate his body camera. His career ended alongside his mentors. Supervisors were demoted. The unit was disbanded. New verification protocols were implemented nationwide. ICE issued a public statement expressing deep regret. It stopped short of a direct apology. Regret is what you feel when you spill coffee. Clarence sat quietly at home, not when you drag a man off his own property. 3 weeks later, Clarence filed a federal civil rights lawsuit. The evidence was overwhelming: multiple video angles, internal records, whistleblower testimony, prior complaints. The government settled for a multi-million-dollar amount, one of the largest individual payouts in a federal civil rights case of its kind. But the settlement included structural reforms, mandatory address verification, strict body camera enforcement, independent review of racial profiling complaints, redesigned bias training. Clarence donated a significant portion to establish a legal defense fund for citizens wrongfully detained. People without cameras, without connections, without a son in the JAG Corps. Weeks later, at 6:40 a.m., Clarence sat on his porch again. Same slippers, same robe, a new coffee mug, the garden in bloom, the American flag catching the morning light. Ruth waved. Donald nodded. The street looked unchanged. But everyone understood something they hadn't before. Clarence began speaking publicly, not with anger, but with precision. "I wore a badge for 34 years, he would say. "I know what it's supposed to mean, and I know exactly what it looks like when someone forgets." Victor Stelling left a federal courthouse months later with no cameras waiting. His name now appeared in training manuals across DHS field offices, a case study in unchecked authority and racial bias. A training bulletin circulated that fall with a single still frame from Donald's video. A black man in a bathrobe, hands cupped behind his back, pressed against his own truck beneath an American flag. Below the image were 2 lines in bold. "This is what failure looks like." No names were needed. The careers were already gone.